before us. We respect the histories, languages, and cultures of First Nations, Métis, Inuit, and all First Peoples of Canada, whose presence continues to enrich our communities. Today's meeting is being simultaneously translated into French. Dana Dragomir, Director of Communications, will explain how to access the French interpretation. Dana?
Bonjour tout le monde. Tous qui veulent participer à la rencontre aujourd'hui en français, vous pouvez le faire avec vos téléphones à partir de l'invitation Zoom. Et il y a une icône d'une globe terrestre. Vous allez sélectionner français. Donc, juste écoutez sur vos écouteurs.
Thank you, Dana. Just to kind of give you a little bit of the order of the day, we're going to spend about an hour presenting, followed by about 30 minutes for questions from both our in-person and online participants. To ask a question through Zoom, please enter it into the Q&A section and we'll answer it during our question period. For everyone in the room, please come up to the microphone right here in the center of the room on the stand and ask your questions. And then following the meeting, we invite everyone to stay for an informal reception. And as you said, Constantinos, it's a room full of friends. So it'll be great to get together and have some fellowship after our meeting. This is my second year as chair of CPATA, although I've been on the board since the college's inception, executing on a broad and innovative mandate to regulate Canadian patent agents and trademark agents in the public interest. CPATA has developed from a startup organization with no funding to a contemporary, best-in-class professional regulator. This past year has been so rewarding with the completion of the competency profiles, the launch of the new exams, and the broad consultation on pathways to licensure. CPATA also took action to protect IP rights holders from an extremely aggressive phishing scam targeting the Canadian public. The CPATA team has done exemplary work, as has its board of directors. I'd now like to take a moment and introduce the board. In May, CPATA held our elections to fill 2 licensee positions on the board. We sincerely thank our outgoing directors, Andrew Currier and Bridget Chan, for their outstanding contributions. We also welcome our new directors, Anne Abigail Fils-Aimé and Dennis Hasko. Anne Abigail is a Class 3 trademark agent in training. She has a Bachelor of International Business Management degree and has over 6 years of experience in the legal services field, helping organizations protect and commercialize their intangible assets. It's an opportune time for Anne Abigail to bring the perspective of future agents to the board's discussions on our entry to practice requirements. Welcome, Anne Abigail. Dennis Hasko is a registered patent agent and a member of the intellectual property group at Fasken, where he advises global clients on strategic patent protection in Canada and the US. He began his career as a patent examiner at the US Patent and Trademark Office and has now more than 35 years of professional experience, bringing a cross-border perspective to international intellectual property law informed by both private practice and in-house roles. And my understanding is Dennis has actually joined us from somewhere in Europe, so like devoted already, because this very special trip was planned well before Dennis was elected. So you're a hero, Dennis. We love you already. On behalf of the current CPATA board, a warm welcome to our new colleagues. CPATA is fortunate to have directors at its helm with such diverse and deep expertise. When I call your name, if you're in the room, please stand so we can acknowledge you. Our appointed directors are Iris Almeida-Cote, Amber Batul, Karima Bawa, Tom Conway. Our elected directors are Steve Garland, Patent Agent Director, Scott Jolliffe, Trademark Agent Director. Thanks, Scott. We're also joined by the chairs of CPATA's regulatory and governance committees. These committees play a vital role in the regulatory initiatives that we fulfill under our mandate. When I call your name, if you're in the room, please stand so we can acknowledge you. Kristen Dangerfield, Chair of the Investigations Committee. Hi, Kristen. Marcel Manjon, Chair of the Discipline Committee. Thanks, Marcel. Bob Plamondon, Chair of the Audit and Risk Committee. Thank you, Bob. Mark Pioro, Chair of the Registration Committee. Thanks, Mark. Our sincere thanks for the leadership roles that you play in fulfilling our regulatory mandate. Now I'll pass the baton to Judith Straczynski, CEO and Registrar, to share more about CPATA and give an update on our strategic framework.
Thanks, Ruth. So before we go any further, I want to just zoom out a bit and reintroduce CPATA. We're celebrating our 4-year anniversary, so we're still quite new. And so what I thought I'd do is share a little bit about this still young organization and hope that you can get to know us a little bit better. I'm also going to share a few other highlights today around some insights we've been getting into the professions, some information about some of the ways we're trying to connect clients with licensees, some improvements to our register that facilitate that, as well as where we're at on our strategic plan that is actually wrapping up at the end of this year. From there, we'll go into where last year fit into all this and where some of our big initiatives are heading next. So first, CPATA is the independent public interest regulator of patent agents and trademark agents in Canada. Our vision is a bold one. It's to provide the public with access to a globally respected body of patent agents and trademark agents who are highly skilled, ethical, and current in their knowledge. So what does it mean to be independent? It means a few things. One is that we're separate from government. We're also separate from any associations. And as our statute requires, our board is actually comprised of diverse directors, but none of them are members of government or members of professional associations who advocate on the interest of members. Independence is reflected in our board structure. It also means that operationally, we're independently operating. We are separate from government. We also are independently funded, which means that our funding primarily comes from licensing fees. It also comes from other fees around exams and related regulatory costs. In terms of being a public interest regulator, well, what does that mean? It's a phrase that's used across professional regulation in Canada to serve the public interest. And for CPATA, we took the time to define what that means. We see us as serving several different publics. We serve the general public and regulate in a manner to build trust among the general public so that they're confident that we're working on behalf of all Canadians. We are working to serve the publics of innovators and clients of patent agents and trademark agents so that they can be assured that they are accessing true professionals offering professional services specific to patent and trademark areas. And of course, our publics include licensees, patent agents, trademark agents, including patent agent and trademark agent trainees. And we regulate these licensees. We set the standards. We oversee and support the ethical and competent delivery of their professional services and work in partnership with them. Decisions that we make have to consider and balance all of these perspectives and all of these interests as we continue to serve the publics. So here are some of the things we do. The government entrusted CPATA with a significant mandate. We're responsible for setting competency standards, entry to practice requirements. We administer the qualifying exams. We set them as well. We breathe life into the code of conduct that is the code of professional conduct that prescribes the conduct for patent agents and trademark agents. We manage a public register where the public can go and search to find patent agents and trademark agents and make sure that those holding out as professionals are in fact professionals and are in good standing. We also establish expectations for professional liability insurance, for continuing professional development, and more on that in a minute, as well as other requirements. We're an institution with an operating budget that's only approximately $3 million, and we're doing all of this work in both English and French. So it's a very wide, broad mandate. Thankfully, we have an incredibly dedicated board and wonderful staff working tirelessly to make it all happen. And we're small but mighty. We have 7 staff. We don't have physical offices. We actually opened in the middle of the pandemic, and so we work remotely. And that also means we benefit from staff located as far east as Halifax and as far west as the Ottawa area. And our directors take us all the way through to the Pacific Coast as well. So this year, we administered some new questions in our annual report, and we have data that we're going to share today about the profession as we have it today. We regulate both patent agents and trademark agents throughout Canada. And you can see from this slide that the majority of them are based in Ontario and Quebec, but we do have geographic representation from across the provinces. And we're continuing to explore the licenses and where there may be unmet geographical needs and where there are other areas that might be looking for additional services. But we do have a robust profession, experts in a wide range. We have not just over 900 Class 1 fully licensed patent agents for Canada and just over 1,200 Class 1 trademark agents. And we have about 20%, just over 20% of our licensees hold both patent and trademark designations. In terms of where these agents work, the primary practice settings are also something we asked our agents about. And it's interesting to see that for patent agents, just about 65% of them work in either law firm settings or in IP agent settings. We also have in-house roles where agents are working in a corporate environment. We have some who are operating as true solos, and we have others who are in diverse other types of areas, not-for-profits and other. When you switch it over to the trademark setting, it's similar, slightly higher number of law firm agents in practice, which tracks with the historical surveys about the trademark profession in particular. 9% in agencies and 10% in-house in corporate environments, 10% as true solos. So you can see a diverse type of practice setting across the country. We also asked our licensees this year around work activities. In the past, some people coming to this new would have perhaps thought that a patent agent just stamps patents all day long, you know, patent in, patent out, trademark in, trademark out. That's not the work of the professional. Our competency profiles talk about IP strategy, talks about understanding the client's needs, working collaboratively with clients. On patent agent side, you can see that half of the time, as reported by our own licensees, is spent on drafting and filing and prosecuting. But there are also other tasks that patent agents do every day. We have IP management, portfolio management, advisory work, litigation support, making out the rest of the half. So it's diverse tasks, diverse work, and we must recognize the full depth of skills and knowledge that comes with this important work that our agents do every day. Turning to patent agents, it's very similar. It's not just about filing and prosecuting trademarks. There's a lot of other work you can see on this slide. 17% is trademark strategy and IP management. We have litigation support, representing clients before the Trademarks Opposition Board is a small but vital part of what trademark agents do. And we have also representing clients in cancellation proceedings. So a mix of transactional work and advocacy work and a robust profession doing this work. In terms of the clients, we have a really interesting self-reporting from the professions as to who they serve. And so when we go to the next slide, you can see that it's a nice sort of bell curve where we've got about 25% working for small and medium-sized enterprises, 19% for publicly traded companies, 18% for large enterprise, 14% on startups. We also have individual innovators represented and research organizations. So you can see all areas of Canadian innovation are reflected here. And you can see that there are all sorts of places where IP is valued and continues to require the assistance of professionals. On the trademark side, we see a similar sort of pie chart here. And so I'm not going to spend too much time here, but you can see again that everyone from individual innovators through to large publicly traded companies are well represented. So this is the sort of data that a regulator is able to garner from licensees, and we're going to continue to monitor them. We're going to be spending some of this year to look for other data trends. And as we ask these questions of licensees year over year, we'll be able to monitor for trends and regulate as agile as possible to understand where there are market needs, what sort of work is being done every day, and to help that for us to effectively regulate it. Another part of our regulation is trying to help connect licensees with clients and clients with licensees. And we have a public register. Public register for some regulators is simply, is this person legit and are they in good standing? But we're among some of the regulators who are trying to become more consumer friendly at the same time. And so we've added in enhanced search functionality, in part thanks to the input we're receiving from our IP ecosystem partners. Last year, we introduced the ability to serve by geography. So you could search if you wanted to, for example, find somebody in Vancouver, you could do that. If you want to find somebody from Montreal, you can now do that. This year, we also added in new functionality to search for languages spoken, our official languages and other languages, as well as types of practice areas. So not just patent and trademark, but the industries in which the licensees are telling the public they're able to do work in. Now, our licensees are bound by our code of conduct, and so whatever they're saying there has to be verifiable and whatnot. But we think this is a helpful tool so that if somebody, for example, is working in life sciences, they can narrow the search to see which professionals are working in that specific area if that's their preference. We also are going to have an icon that our licensees can opt in or opt out to take as to whether or not they're taking on new clients. And this will help narrow the friction points for potential clients who at times call up firms only to find out that they are not at a position to take on new clients at the moment. This will help for the search and to connect clients with professionals with reduced friction. So now turning to our strategic framework, it's coming to a close, but this was our first framework for 23 to 25. It focused on organizational and regulatory infrastructure as we build a regulator from nothing, professional development and competency, professional regulation, how we communicate and work with our ecosystem partners and the public, and of course, governance and oversight around all of it. And there's been lots of progress made. At the high level, some of these areas are related to building the regulator. This includes elements like continuing to build out these online robust systems for the publics we serve and for licensees as well, who have a back-end system that is becoming, we're always continuously trying to improve for them. We're developing CPATA's relationships in the IP ecosystem to work effectively in the best interests of the publics. And we're ensuring that that CPATA has strong best-in-class governance and policies to support regulation. There are other priorities that we're working on that are ongoing. It's ongoing work that we began, such as addressing complaints about licensees, instances of unauthorized practice, and we'll have more about that shortly, as well as supporting the continued evolution of patent agent and trademark agent privilege, which for the college we know is essential to protecting IP clients' confidential rights. And yet other elements of the framework have been our focus in 2025. We're going to be launching a bit later this year some ethics videos that introduce our code of professional conduct, and we're grateful for the licensees who helped to develop the content and present it. Stay tuned, that's coming out later this year. We also released an article on generative artificial intelligence, or Gen AI, and it's been very well received. This article talks about the practices that patent and trademark agents should be considering at a high level and provides ethical and practical considerations for them. And one area, however, that we decided to defer off the strategic plan is the area of continuing professional development, or CPD. And that's because after we've set our competency frameworks, after we understood what it takes to be an agent all day, and we looked at the entry-level knowledge and skills required, we thought we could use the time to learn more about training paths and how knowledge is being instilled to help us get an understanding of what will be needed for continuing professional development on the ongoing basis. And so we will be coming back to that important topic that is part of our statutory mandate, but we'll be doing so as part of our next strategic plan, possibly as early as 2026. So now we're going to shift to the Back to the Future part, where we talk about 2024, but also are going to link it to what we're doing this year as well. These are matters that were covered in our annual report. And here's a weird twist, is that our annual report has not yet been tabled in Parliament because of the election and a new government in place. And so it's not publicly available yet. As soon as it becomes available, we'll put it on our website. But for today, what we'll be doing is highlighting some of the accomplishments from past year, and rest assured, it is often based on what you would find in our annual report. So we're currently working to, over the last 4 years, the starting point for us has been access. And this is really a crux piece for us, is to make sure that since inception, we consider how a regulator such as CPATA can contribute to facilitating access to professional services and patent and intellectual and trademark agent work. We've been working to ensure there are clear outlined expectations for practitioners, these competency profiles that Jen is going to talk about a bit, and ensure that the pathways for licensure are fair, assess properly the required competencies, and don't have unnecessary, and the key word here is unnecessary, barriers to entry. I'll now pass it to Jen Slobodkin, who's CPATA's excellent Director of Registration and Education. She's the Deputy Registrar, and she's going to talk specifically about some of the progress made in 2024 on initiatives in this area. Jen?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Judah. It's great to be here. So in 2024, CPATA finalized the competency framework for patent agents and trademark agents. The establishment of clear expectations for practitioners attracts individuals into the professions. It empowers the public to know what they can expect from practitioners, and it helps current agents direct their continuing professional development. No such framework existed prior to CPATA's coming into force. After the adoption of the technical competency profiles for patent agents and trademark agents in 2023, CPATA focused on the creation of the Professional Foundations Competency Profile in 2024, relying on working groups of licensees and a profession-wide validation survey that was completed by 108 licensees. The Professional Foundations Competency Profile was adopted by the board in March of 2025, and this profile outlines the professional skills which must complement an agent's technical knowledge and skills for effective practice. With the adoption of this profile, a complete competency framework now exists for the professions, and we thank everyone, including all of the licensees, who contributed their insight to the creation of these profiles. So part of CPATA's mandate is involving administering of the qualifying examinations for becoming a patent agent or a trademark agent. Since CPATA's coming into force, IP stakeholders have raised concerns about the exams. Enhancements to the legacy examinations started in 2021 with the decision to administer the exams online to facilitate access and reduce costs to licensees who otherwise would have had to travel to write them. CPATA began to redevelop the qualifying exams after the technical competency profiles were approved in 2023, and the new exams were launched in 2024. With the help of over 100 licensees, some of which are sitting here today, CPATA launched an entirely new exam regime, which assesses the knowledge and skills that are outlined in the technical competency profiles. The new exams are divided into knowledge exams and skills exams, and the new framework is designed so that candidates must demonstrate their foundational knowledge before moving on to demonstrate their skills and applying their knowledge in that way. To foster candidate success, we offer sample questions, and for each exam administration, we provide a candidate orientation session. Additionally, starting in 2025, we started to provide 2 opportunities to write the knowledge examinations, which allowed candidates who were not yet able to demonstrate competency on that exam another opportunity before the skills exams were written to do that. But today, I am most excited to talk about the work that CPATA begun on assessing the pathways to licensure, specifically on the training program. As of CPATA's coming into force, the pathway for becoming a patent agent or a trademark agent had remained fairly unchanged for many years. Currently, agents in training, must complete a 24-month training program and then demonstrate competency on the qualifying examinations. Though these requirements produced many excellent agents, CPATA has heard from licensees and other IP stakeholders that there is room for improvement. So after establishing the competency profiles and redeveloping the qualifying exams, it was necessary for us to turn our attention to reviewing the training program model for entering the professions. The training programs matter. They are a key component to the licensure process, and yet their strengths and challenges had not yet been studied. Over time, the duration of the training program has varied from 0 to 1 to 2 years. In other jurisdictions, such as the US, training programs are not a requirement in the process to becoming an agent. We know that there are other ways to instill knowledge and skills, and we want to know what is working on the current model and what may need improvements. Given the different ways that professions and patent agents and trademark agents in particular learn and enter the professions, there might also be complementary pathways that may augment the training experience. And ultimately, we want to land on a right touch approach for Canada. So in 2024, we undertook a broad consultation about the training programs. Today, we're reporting on what we heard during this consultation, where there's room for improvement within the existing frameworks, and what changes we're making immediately. First, I'll provide an overview of the consultation process. I will then present 10 key findings from the report, and finally, I will introduce the next steps that are planned for the next 12 months to address some of the issues that were identified. These first actions do not represent changes to the training program requirements, but offer support to facilitate a successful experience for trainees and supervisors. And as a long-term, slow-moving project, we also wanted to explore what other ways individuals could potentially acquire the competencies outside of the current training program. Should changes to the training requirements be proposed, then we will be consulting on those changes. In 2024, we retained an independent third-party consultant, Calibrate Solutions, to gather information from IP stakeholders and licensees about their experiences with and insights about apprenticeships. The purpose of the consultation project was to assess the merits and the challenges associated with the 24-month apprenticeship model. The consultation was conducted between April and November of 2024 and included focus groups with over 50 participants, a survey of licensees, including trainees and supervisors, that was completed by over 100 licensees. The focus group participants included supervisors, trainees, consumers, as well as participants from CPO and IPIC. CPATA also engaged in outreach and received submissions in response to our consultation paper. We are grateful to IPIC for the lunchtime roundtable that we were able to host on this topic at their 2024 conference in St. John's, and we appreciate all of the feedback from all of those who shared their insights through Calibrate. All right, so here are the 10 key findings. The first is, and this probably isn't too much of a shocker, but the greatest barrier to licensure is actually the inability to secure an apprenticeship. Respondents from all consultation mediums stressed that securing an apprenticeship was the single greatest barrier to licensure. As there aren't nearly enough placements for the number of individuals seeking an apprenticeship, this requirement acts as a bottleneck to the licensing process. The second key finding is a lack of structured training requirements for intellectual property apprenticeships poses difficulties for both trainees and supervisors, and guidance from CPATA was desired by all. Apprenticeship experiences vary greatly as individual supervisors currently solely determine their training content and structure for their trainees. All agreed that the true value of an apprenticeship depends on the quality of the supervision they are getting and the dedication and support of individual supervisors. Both supervisors and trainees expressed a desire for more structured training requirements and guidance from CPATA to better help everyone involved in the process, particularly with recent changes to the exams and the introduction of the competency profiles. The third key finding was that the profession largely views the apprenticeship model as vital. Most respondents agreed that the apprenticeship model is a vital aspect of training to become an agent. Intellectual property practice is incredibly complex. To properly serve the public, agents require time, hands-on experience, and mentorship to learn the practical and technical requirements for the job. Engaging with clients under supervision of an experienced practitioner is an essential way to fully develop the necessary skill set for practice. Keeping the existing 24-month time requirement for all was the most common response for both survey and focus group respondents. The fourth key finding was that some respondents were open to CPATA exploring education-based pathways to licensure. This could include academic programs, courses or modular education, and/or a combination of education and experience. Importantly, CPATA would consider that knowledge and skills from competency profiles, what knowledge and skills from the competency profiles could be learned through education versus experience, the potential cost to trainees, market conditions for the viability of programs, and whether programs and courses are offered in both English and French. Education-based pathways could improve access to the professions by removing some of the barriers to entry that were identified relating to securing an apprenticeship. The fifth key finding was that the examination timelines are delaying entry to practice. Both supervisors and trainees expressed frustration that the current examination timelines and schedules are delaying entry to practice. Many trainees are having to wait 3 years to challenge their final exam based on when they've completed their training program. And this extends the 24-month apprenticeship past the 2-year mark as trainees wait for exam sittings and the results of their examinations. The sixth key finding was that supervisors would like to see training incentives introduced. Supervisors and firm representatives highlighted the difficulties of training new agents, including the extensive time and monetary burden that supervisors take on to educate new agents, particularly if those individuals leave soon after becoming licensed. Many respondents viewed training as a service to the professions. The seventh key finding indicated that respondents cautioned against making rapid changes to the licensing process. We hear the concerns of making rapid changes, and we agree that a slower pace to change is the right approach. As mentioned, should major changes be proposed to the licensing process, CPATA will consult on those changes. The eighth key finding was that intellectual property practice should be promoted more broadly to encourage more individuals, including individuals from diverse backgrounds, to enter the professions. Respondents explained that more needs to be done to promote these careers. Many trainees indicated that they had no idea that this career was even an option during their undergraduate training and education. Several stumbled upon the practice themselves or were introduced to it while already established in a career. The ninth key finding was that respondents identified several metrics that CPATA may wish to use to help evaluate the effectiveness of the current licensing pathway. In addition to the data that CPATA already has access to, including size of the professions and examination statistics, respondents suggested conducting post-licensing surveys. And finally, the 10th key finding was that clarity around CPATA's role was required. Some respondents expressed confusion over which roles CPATA had taken over from other intellectual property organizations. These 10 key findings were used to develop the next steps that CPATA will be taking to address some of the issues that were identified. These next steps are planned to be implemented within the next 12 months. The first is updating the public register to support securing an apprenticeship. The consultation found that the greatest barrier to licensure was an inability to secure an apprenticeship. As a first step in breaking down this barrier, Class 1 and Class 2 agents who are open to supervising a Class 3 agent in training will be able to indicate so on their CPATA profile. In turn, Class 3 agents in training who are looking for a supervisor will also be able to indicate so on their CPATA profile. And this information will then become visible and searchable on the public register should both parties provide consent to do so. CPATA recognizes that this is just one small step to help connect those seeking apprenticeships and will be continuing to explore how it and other IP stakeholders may be able to help bridge the gaps between those interested in the professions and those open to serving as supervisors. The second action we'll be taking is developing training resources to provide guidance to supervisors and trainees on those training requirements. To support supervisors and trainees, we will develop to support supervisors and trainees develop training experiences that prepare trainees for entry to practice, we'll be providing materials that may help structure their training and allow for all knowledge and skill areas to be addressed during their 24-month training period. Additional training resources will be considered for development in the next 12 to 24 months as well. The third action we will be taking is revising the eligibility criteria for Class 3 agents in training to attempt the patent and trademark knowledge examinations. Starting with the winter 2026 administration, Class 3 agents in training who have completed at least 12 months of approved supervised training will be eligible to attempt the knowledge examination if they wish to do so. As a reminder, the knowledge exams are just the first part of the examination process. A licensee must demonstrate competency on the knowledge exams before being eligible to attempt the skills exams. This reduction from 24 to 12 months is intended to help trainees complete the licensure process and enter unrestricted practice faster on demonstrating entry-level competence. This change reduces wait times that trainees have had to take between completing their apprenticeship requirements and starting the examination process. Together, these three operational changes will be implemented over the next 12 months and will help facilitate access to the professions, reduce anxiety about the apprenticeship requirements for both supervisors and trainees, improve consistency of training, and reduce unnecessary delays on exam writing, thereby potentially reducing entry to practice licensure time. Finally, we will continue to explore alternative pathways to licensure. We will continue to reflect on the learnings from the consultation. Agents in training, supervisors, and other IP stakeholders brought up important considerations that require further reflection by CPATA's board. The consultation confirmed that hands-on training is a vital component of learning the knowledge and skills required to be a patent agent or a trademark agent. The possibility of integrating education-based components to complement or support the apprenticeships or to provide an alternative pathway to improve access to the professions should be considered further. Again, these areas continue to be explored and no policy decisions have been made as to whether such pathways can or should be implemented. Should such major changes be proposed, we will consult on those changes. I will now pass it over to Victoria to talk about our complaints and discipline experiences this year, the significant unauthorized practice fraud that threatened and continue to threaten Canadian IP rights holders, and the actions that CPATA continues to take to try to combat that.
Thanks very much, Jen. Hi, everybody. I'm Victoria Reese, General Counsel, Professional Responsibility for CPATA. I'm a lawyer, and I come from Portuguese Cove in Nova Scotia, which is not suffering from smoke inhalation right now, so please come join us. One of the key ways that CPATA supports a thriving IP system in Canada is by overseeing the ethical and competent practice and delivery of services by agents. And this means striving through both proactive and reactive measures to support licensees in understanding their obligations and how to apply the rules under the Code of Professional Conduct for patent agents and trademark agents in Canada. So we help licensees avoid becoming the subject of complaints through, first of all, our proactive ethics inquiry process, which we're so pleased is seeing an increased usage this year. We've had as many ethics inquiries in the first 4 months as we've had in entire years in the previous years. The lessons learned from these ethics inquiries from agents often become the basis for, you'll see articles, ethics articles in our regular newsletters. And these articles are archived and available to be searched in a searchable database. So what I find interesting is that we learn a lot from agents about what's going on in practice through these inquiries, and the agents learn a lot about how to apply their ethical rules and how to provide guidance to in the client's best interests. When we do get complaints, we're very fortunate that our level of complaints remains extremely low for the population of agents. And the majority of conduct concerns are addressed through our early resolution agent conduct inquiry process or through the registrar's authority to dismiss complaints under certain circumstances where appropriate. Complaints referred to the investigations committee are investigated and addressed in a fair, thorough, and timely manner by experienced licensees and non-licensees. Hearings and written decisions are public and support a transparent and fully accountable process. And CPATA is extremely fortunate to have two highly experienced and skilled chairs for these two regulatory committees, Chris Dangerfield for the Investigations Committee and Marcel Mongeon for the Discipline Committee. Chris and Marcel have spent the last 4 years, over 4 years now, building these key aspects of the professional responsibility program and have provided outstanding leadership in these areas. With regard to unauthorized practice matters, overall, we act swiftly to try and protect Canada's innovators and creators against fraud and unauthorized practice by non-qualified practitioners. Starting in about August of 2024 and continuing to this day, members of the public have been targeted in an expansive phishing attempt by fraudulent individuals and companies who urge action and request payments to prevent threats to these individuals' intellectual property rights. These frauds are sophisticated and extremely agile. They likely use artificial intelligence to craft messages and websites that appear legitimate, and at times they appropriate the names of actual lawyers and licensees, although most of the time they use invented names. So CPATA has aggressively responded to protect those targeted. And to date, the college has received and responded to over 350 expressions of concern from both licensees and members of the public. We've published multiple notices advising public caution. We've worked with authorities to shut down fraudulent websites. We've launched a new fraud web page, which centralizes notices and tips to spot fraud and contact information to alert CPATA, which has proven very effective. And we've collaborated with CPO, IPIC, and others. And the feedback that I'm now getting is that when people receive these phishing scams, they're searching, immediately coming to CPATA's website, be able to self-sufficiently identify that something is a fraud, and then they let us know about it so that we're aware of what's going on. CPATA names and shames the fraudsters. On a dedicated web page, we have listed the fraudulent names, business names, websites, and phone numbers used by the fraudsters. We also provide sample emails and offer tips to help victims identify that they're being phished. In addition to this big phishing scam, we've also responded to UAP or unauthorized practice concerns about non-agent lawyers and others who've been marketing their IP services in a way that may cause confusion amongst the public or even mislead the public about the extent of services that they can provide, or about whether there is in fact a patent or trademark agent associated with their firm. And in these cases, we review the websites and social media, contact the firms directly, and point out what they are and are not permitted to do or to market, and request that changes be made to their marketing. And I'm happy to say that we've been successful in a half a dozen cases where we've had very constructive responses from the firms who have made immediate changes. They weren't aware or weren't aware somebody was watching. We have authority under the Act to enforce this through applications to the federal court, but to date, we've been able to avoid that expense and such a lengthy process through our proportionate risk-focused response to these concerns. CPATA has invested significant time and resources in helping protect the public from being defrauded in such a nefarious way, and in helping, and we will continue to act in the best interests of the Canadian public in reaction to this scam. So with that, I will pass it to our CFO, Sean Walker, to provide an overview of CPATA's 2024 audited financial statements.
Perfect. We good? All right. Thanks, Victoria. So as Victoria said, I'm Sean Walker, the College or CPATA's Chief Financial Officer, also based out of Halifax, Nova Scotia. So I'm going to talk today to give an overview of the highlights from 2024, but the full audited statements are currently present on our website. The link is up there, and they're also on our report section on the website. Okay. So I'll give some background around the external audit. So the Audit Risk Committee, led by Bob Lamondon, as we talked about, met with the auditors from Doan Grant Thornton in mid-March and recommended the approval of the statements to the board. They were subsequently approved on March 24th, and as mentioned, a full copy has been posted on the website. We had a very successful year-end audit, and again in 2024, with a clean audit opinion, which stated that the financial statements presented fairly in all material respects the financial position of CPATA at December 31st, 2024. And I'm happy to announce that there was no adjustments required to the statements throughout the process. A little more housekeeping. CPATA is a not-for-profit entity for accounting and tax purposes, so therefore we're not subject to income tax, but we do still have to file an information return annually with the CRA, which has been done and sent in. And CPATA follows the Canadian Accounting Standards for Not-for-Profit Organizations, or ASNPO. Okay. Some overall financial results. So we were very favorable in 2024. We had an annual surplus of just over 1.4 million, which was $1 million better than the $400,000 surplus that we had budgeted for the year. This is, of course, also a much better result than 2023 when we saw a $12,000 deficit. And even with the higher than expected revenue in 2024, we were still very diligent and kept expenses well under budget. We didn't spend more just because we were seeing more revenue coming in, and we contributed, and the plan has been to contribute that surplus to our annual net asset reserves, which currently sits at 1.7 million. And we are on our way to building our financial reserves, and Judah will speak about that a bit more in a few minutes. Okay. To highlight a few areas of our finances, looking at the college's financial position, which is shown on the statement of financial position. On the asset side, we finished the year with 1.9 million in assets, which is made up of just over 1.8 in cash and GIC investments, with some much smaller amounts for like our GST, HST receivable, prepaid expenses, and capital assets. For amounts on the liability side, we had 175,000 in amounts owing, and this was to our suppliers at the end of December, and also for payments to individuals who sit on committees and were paid for the fourth quarter, who support, of course, our regulatory, education, and competency initiatives. And then, as I mentioned, for the net assets or reserves, as mentioned, the surplus contributed to the reserves to the amount now of 1.7 million, and which, of course, then is about 1.4 higher than we were in 2023. Okay. Just a quick rundown of the financial operations for 2024. So our revenues increased in 2024 compared to 2023, mostly in the areas of our agents, licensee fees, and exam fees. As Jen mentioned, we had the addition of the additional knowledge exams in the spring, which brought in a little extra revenue as well. That starts in 2025 with our budget. And we also saw an increase in the number of exam writers, which led to a little increase in our income there as well. Also, with the extra cash that we were able to bring in through the fees, we were able to invest in a GIC and receive additional interest income in 2024. And then again, as we mentioned, we're still very conservative with our expenses and came in almost $500,000 under budget for expenses. And our largest areas of expenses continue to be staff compensation, legal fees for discipline, hearing, and regulatory matters, board committee and other program support remuneration, and our translation costs. Okay. So jumping slightly ahead to our 2025 budget, this is a quick one-page synopsis. So 2025 represents the second year of our multi-year plan to build the financial reserves, our net asset reserves, which I mentioned again are 1.7 million. And the budget for 2025 this year, the goal or the plan was to bring in approximately 1 million in annual surplus to those reserves, which in the plan would be around 2.7 by the end of 2025. On the revenue side, we saw our fees increase by 2% related to the CPI index as required in our bylaws, which the intention is for us to keep up with inflation and increased costs from our suppliers and vendors. As I mentioned, we did have the second administration of the knowledge exams, so we've seen a little blip in revenue already, as those are ongoing. And we hope to have increased interest income on funds held in GICs now that we have a little more principal, and hopefully the interest rates will cooperate. Okay. And then for expenses, we've continued development of numerous programs, the exams and competency work, the pathways, continued discipline hearings and unauthorized practice investigations. And with all that, we've actually seen a decrease in our budgeted expenses by about $100,000 from 24 to 2025. And as Judah mentioned earlier, we do have a very lean team with only 7 staff members and no physical offices, so no brick and mortar, no rent. So a lot of our expenses are people and our computers. And we're very conservative and very tight with our budget, and we try to keep expenses as low as possible. And now, as mentioned, I'm going to pass it back to Judah so we can explain what's next for CPATA.
All right, so we've seen where we've come from, where last year took us to, and now let's look even further into the future. We're nearing that strategic plan end of 25, and we're already looking ahead. And the board is starting to consider priorities for the next strategic plan, which will be from 2026 to 2028. So to be sure, it's going to continue many of the priorities that have been with us since the start. We're going to be dedicated to making sure that we have fair and defensible entry pathways with our new exams being administered every year. We're still going to pick up the phone when agents have questions for us about ethics, and we're still going to be responding when the public is worried about unauthorized practice. So a lot of the work continues steady as she goes. We expect that the strategic planning is going to also look at some other areas. I mentioned continuing professional development, for example, where we know there are many in the professions asking what the policy will be, what that will look like, and we'll of course be consulting with licensees and the communities writ large to learn what the needs are and to make sure that we find a right touch approach that recognizes that many of our licensees are also regulated in other professions. We're going to expect to have the work complete on our planning by the end of 2025 in order to have business plans and budget estimates available for implementation. And that will inform the resources that we're going to need for the next few years to fund our operations. So on the financial side, following that planning, we're really pleased to be ahead of schedule right now. That is fantastic news for all. We're building our initial reserve funds. Our startup levels are now being reviewed by our expert audit and risk committee, who are researching and assessing longer-term requirements for a regulator of our nature and size. They expect to be in a position to make recommendations on the appropriate reserve funds to the CPATA board later this year, and the CPATA board will ultimately work to assess what the longer-term reserves should be with that advice in mind, hopefully by end of year. This means that CPATA will soon be in a position to assess the longer-term financial needs of the organization and right-size fees accordingly. So we want to assure our licensees that CPATA's committed to appropriate fees that reflect the true longer-term costs of regulation. So in 2024, it was necessary for our longer-term financial sustainability and viability to increase licensing fees so that we could have sufficient funds, not just for operations on our day-to-day, but to build reserves, which are essential for any regulator. As a reminder, though, current licensing fees are included in our bylaws and are subject to cost of living increases or decreases annually. So by the end of 2025, we'll be armed with the data we need to review licensing fees and should be in a position to work with the professions and consult with them as early as 2026. This will help us determine the appropriate right-sized fees for our next chapter. And then we'll work with the Government of Canada to implement any required changes via our bylaws as soon as possible. So that's the look ahead. And before we open to questions, I just want to finally thank everyone who worked with CPATA in the past year. We rely on the expertise of our licensees in so many ways. We heard from Jen about the over 100 licensees who participated in focus groups and consultations around apprenticeships and what's working and where we can make improvements. We have countless licensees who have helped over the years to set standards, to help set and mark exams, to be involved in our registration work. This truly is vital work, and we are so appreciative of all the licensees who help us. We're also appreciative of all the support and collaboration from others in the IP sector. A thank you to our colleagues from ISED and from CPO, and we're grateful to have Konstantinos and his team here with us today, and colleagues from ISED as well. And we're also grateful to IPIC, who continuously supports licensees and the IP sector in general through their initiatives and advocacy. I've also appreciated the opportunity to speak with numerous IP funding agencies and others in the IP ecosystem this year to understand the needs of consumers and where CPATA can assist and ensure that those who are in startup or building or scaling are getting the type of IP support and professional services that they are looking for. And your feedback has been so helpful in understanding the needs of consumers. 2024, we were fortunate to participate in many outreach efforts and many conferences where we shared our expertise and learned from others. We were in St. John's, Newfoundland for IPIC's annual conference and learned so much there, and Jen has touched on that. We've also presented and been able to attend different conferences where we're promoting our practice guidance on artificial intelligence, and I'm looking forward to speaking on that later this month at an IPIC webinar, and again in the fall with various regulators. Earlier this year, we've also been able to touch base with different IP organizations through conferences held by IPON late last year, as well as by others, including a consortium of IP groups who held an in-person and webinar about the future of IP education that took place in May. So we've had so many touch points with so many. And as a young regulator, these are crucial for us to understand the IP system and where we can play a proactive role. We'll continue to work alongside our licensees and our colleagues and are grateful that this past year was such a wonderful experience. And so with that, we'll open it up to questions. And I believe I want to thank everyone who's still with us online and those of us who are in person. For those who are in person and have a question, please step up to the microphone. And for those who might be online and have a question, please just drop it into the Q&A. And our Director of Communications, Dana, who you heard slightly from earlier, she'll be able to read it out. And if we don't get to your question, please just email us info@cpata-cabamc.ca, or just find me and email me, and we'll answer it. So we've got a few minutes for questions. Let's go.
Hello. Okay, we have a question online. I can start with that.
Sure.
With respect to disciplinary measures, can you explain why the discipline proceedings are shown on YouTube? Is CPATA not concerned about prejudicing the client's rights, publicizing the information regarding the patent application?
Thank you for the question.
Yes, I'm not sure. Yeah.
So the question again was, when we have hearings, and they are few and far between, but when we have hearings, they are live cast. And that is consistent with our open courts principle, that people should be able to view hearings. And the question is, might this come to a risk to the client who may have confidential information, might have privileged information? What do you do to protect the client's interest when these cases happen? So I can assure you that our discipline committee that operates independently has already studied this and has taken the best practices from open courts principle by making it available for those who want to observe the hearings live. They are not to be recorded. They are not to be, tweeted about, etc. They are just like a court of law in that respect. But they also have policies in place so that when a case is advanced, we remove references that are confidential or privileged, so that if there is a client with sensitive information, for example, that is, for example, still going through the patent process, that information would not be shown in public. We haven't, I don't believe, had this circumstance yet, and the chair of the discipline committee is shaking his head no, but were there ever a case where there was highly sensitive, confidential, or privileged information that would need to be shown to the tribunal, they could hold in-camera hearings, which is to mean that those parts, and only those parts of the hearings, would be held offline so that that confidential, privileged information would be protected. And so we have measures in place, and the policies of the discipline committee address this and are available on our website under their information.
Thanks. That's Grant Lyons.
Hi.
One point I'm going to start with, I don't think we touched on, but looking around the room, I think you've done a great job with staff retention, because if I'm not mistaken, everybody who's in the room today was in the room last year. And I think that's a great job. Excellent to have that kind of continuity in such a young organization. So that's a complimentary comment for me. Questions, probably two questions. One, Sean, probably. I think you said you're expecting 1.4 to be added, or sorry, 1.4 was added this past year. You're expecting 1 million to be added to the reserve the next year. If you could explain like why you think it's going to be 400 grand less, or I didn't think your expenses, the slide before the looking ahead slide, I didn't think the expenses were going to increase 400 grand, just to see why the reduction in the forecast to be added to the reserve. Oh. I'll just get the other question out there, and then I'll take a back row again. I think it was a year ago, before the increase in fees of 80%, you had a target for the reserve. Yeah, and you can correct me on the number, but I know you articulated a number. I think it was 3 million. Could be wrong. I'd like to ask where that target, before you get the revenue, plays into a target evaluation now when you know the revenue model. Obviously you want to be cautious against being driven by the revenue. And I just want to understand what your view is of the target you set before the increase in revenue that we saw, or the increase in fees that we saw that resulted in an increase in revenue.
Okay.
Got it? Okay, thanks.
I can take the first one.
Talk about the reserves, and Sean can talk about the budget estimates for this year. So do you want to start, Sean?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So the budget for 2024, the intention was $1 million surplus, or sorry, a $400,000 surplus. We came in at 1.4, so 1.4 million. So that was $1 million higher than the budget. So we were able to contribute 1.4 million to the reserves. For 2025, we've budgeted $1 million surplus. which compared to 2024's budget of a $400,000 surplus, we've got now at $1 million. So where we're at the 1.7 million in reserves now, the budget is that we're expecting another $1 million from the, like if we're right on budget for 2025, that will contribute another $1 million to the reserves. So the expenses were under budget in 2024 by $500,000. But that's just compared to budget. The expenses compared to the budgeted expenses compared for in 2025 compared to 2024, there's just $100,000 change there.
Why focus on budget? I'm asking if you got a 1.4 revenue from that you increased to the reserve this past year. That's
Yep.
correct, right?
Yep, to make a total of 1.7.
Okay.
Yep.
So why is it going to be 1 for the next year?
Just that that's where we budgeted revenue over expenses. So we
So you're
don't
expecting your expenses, do you expect that kind of declining in your revenue?
No, we expect revenue to be similar, but the expenses we expect to be about $400,000 higher than 2024.
400 grand higher.
Yes.
Okay, I thought it was less. Can we go back to the slide that said?
The budgeted expenses are $100,000 less in 2025 than 2024, but we expect the actuals to be about $400,000 higher.
Can we go to okay, can we just go to the slide that was before, the one before that one? Yeah. Overall increase in expense of 100 grand.
And that's compared to budget, not compared to actuals. So for 2025, we expect the expenses to be about $400,000 to $500,000 higher than the actuals in 2024.
So that's a budget higher.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. We'll see where they come in.
And I think the follow-up question was about the reserves and how do you look at them and where are we heading? The reserves that were initially set were sort of the startup reserves. What do we need right now in case we get a major case in immediately right now? And so we had targeted our operating reserve at 6 months of your annual budget, which was about $1.5 million, if I recall. And we were trying to cover off the risk of one major case at the time when it came to discipline. And so what we did is we looked at some estimates and we talked to some other regulators, including, we looked at what IPIC, when they were looking at what a regulator might require, they had looked at a complex case and said, based on their data at a particular point in time, it would cost X. And we took that and marked it up for inflation, given the passage of time. Long story short is for one major significant case, numerous appeals or of a vexatious litigant or those sorts of things, we were budgeting $750,000. We're going to meet that. And so the question now, and we're very happy that we're ahead of schedule on our rainy day funds, if you will, but rainy days do come. And so what we're trying to do now is say, okay, this is looking very good. We would like to make sure that we have the discipline reserves in place that are for the longer term for the regulator, because you can end up with more than one major case at a time. And we've seen that happen in other smaller regulatory environments. And we also know that having that in place at the right levels will just set us for the longer term success. In an ideal world, the rain doesn't come and you just park that and you leave it. And then you can focus your fees on what your operating is going to be. And so we're going to hopefully look to operating. There are a couple of few areas we need to still build out, but we're not trying to build a major significant change here. We're trying to continue to grow at a reasonable rate and only for the mandate that we've been provided with. And so we're looking at that and we'll land. And so long story short is we had 1.5 for operations, 750 as a starting point for discipline. We're looking at both very carefully to scope them for longer term. And that information we should have back to board and tied up in late 25 or early 26.
I have a question online. If we can alternate maybe in person and online. So the question is, how do you plan to implement CPD in these professions? Unlike many other fields, there aren't formal certification courses that reflect ongoing technological updates for agents. Without that, what would serve as the benchmark for meeting CPD requirements?
So that's an excellent question. And the answer is we're going to ask licensees and we're going to ask the public to understand what the needs are. One of the reasons we were able to not rush into CPD planning is when we surveyed the professions at the outset of CPATA's creation, we asked how much training people are taking. And agents typically, without any regulatory requirements, we're taking a lot of training because there's substantive training, there's technical training, there's legal training, there's ethics training now. And so what we're going to do is come back to the professions to ask. And we know that people are already taking training as engineers, as lawyers, as other professionals at times. And then there are some where they are not part of other professions, and you're able to really focus exclusively on patent agent, trademark agent work. We want to make sure that we can consider what sort of policies could be in place that would recognize related skills development and work to develop a right touch framework. There are different regulatory approaches to CPD, from counting numbers of hours to self-directed learning plans. What this board is going to be doing is looking at the different options and where regulators are heading around CPD, because CPD is part of that bargain with the public who expect professionals to stay current, while recognizing that these professionals have many different ways that they may complete such training. We also recognize that there are lots of trainings available both in Canada and globally. IPIC provides excellent education. I'll be on a panel with them in a couple of weeks. We know that there are bar associations with IP programming. There are international organizations such as INTA, such as FICP. There are lots of places. WIPO has wonderful multilingual education. And so we're going to want to keep that in account as well. So while CPATA hasn't developed the policy yet, and there's nothing mandatory yet, we will be coming back to all of you to consult on that.
Hi, Judah.
Hi.
It's Rula Thomas from IP Ontario. I'm really interested if you can just speak a little bit more about how you're going to help identify the professional within this different sectors that they operate. If I look around this room, many of us have been practicing for a long time, and we probably check a lot of those boxes in all the different areas. Where are you with that? And what's the plan?
So right now we're agile and we try things. So we're going to try and we'll see, make sure it doesn't break. What we've done right now is we've talked to the licensees, and we're going to continue to educate on this and to roll out some communications about this. But what we're doing is we're letting licensees decide for themselves whether they believe, keeping in mind that their ethical obligation is that it's got to be independently verifiable. They can then put on our register which industries they serve. And so we're expecting that licensees are only going to tick off boxes in areas where they have prior experience. As they may gain more experience, they can come back online and add a new industry. It's a blunt tool. It's imperfect. And licensees will have to be mindful of their duties to be transparent and fair and reasonable in how they hold themselves out. And clients also are going to need to ask questions of licensees when they're trying to find the right fit professional. So for now, it's on the licensees themselves. We're going to see how it goes. There are different other ways we might refine it over time, but we're starting with this system, and we're going to see how the take-up is.
Primary sectors versus others?
It's currently an open list, but that's the thing about our register is we can tweak it pretty quickly. So we're going to see how it goes. And it may be that it goes to primary. It may be that we ask on a subsequent annual report that you provide us the industries you serve by percentage and only allow certain percentages to reflect in your practice. For this year, we started with a voluntary adoption model. And so we didn't want people to have to answer there were certain questions that didn't make the cut on this rollout, but we're going to be monitoring that one carefully and see what the right touch approach is. It might need a bit of refinement over time.
For now, we don't have other questions online.
Hi, it's Paula Clancy. I had a quick question about the CPATA Act and regulations. So we've lived with it for 4 years now. Is there any investigation or kind of review of the legislation that's ongoing with CPATA or the board in terms of tweaks that need to be made to the legislation, or is that not high on your priority right now, which would be understandable? But I just would like to get a sense of the act and the regulations and what is going on behind the scenes on that front.
I'll speak just on my CEO hat, not the board hat. It's very early days. 4 years in is pretty new. There are always things you wish were done a little differently, but I just don't know whether there's anything there that rises to the level that you want to go back to a very busy government with a very busy agenda. We'll have to see, but operationally at the moment, things are working well. I think that there are no parts of the act that are causing significant issues for our operations. So on policy questions, that would be a question for board, but operationally we're functioning within the mandate as given.
I can just feather in a little bit more on that, Paula. So to Judah's point, there are things that one could wish were a little bit different, and we will, I believe at some point in time, the time will be right to take a really thorough review there and understand what are the things that it makes sense for us to actually go back and ask for revisions to legislation on. But at this point in our nascent, career, it hasn't risen to top priority yet. Yeah, because we're managing to work with what we've got. So yeah, thanks.
We don't have any more questions online, but I do want to encourage the participants online to use the Q&A. It's a great way to be here with us.
Hello, Mervyn Valadares. I'm at National Defense. Federal public servants, especially hiring managers, are very much aware of the language of work requirements under the Official Languages Act. In a couple weeks' time, all senior supervisors and managers will have to be functionally bilingual. I'm wondering what efforts CPATA is thinking about or has in the pipe for developing bilingual patent and trademark agents. That's my first question. And because I'm looking for some to hire right now and I can't, it's really hard. Second question about the development program. So my shop has a couple Class 1 agents, but our experience or our, speaking with our counterparts at the UK Ministry of Defense, who has a similar type of training program, is they spend the time and effort to train candidates to become chartered patent attorneys, just on the patent side. And as soon as they get their ticket, they flee for the firms, right? So what incentive, I know you had talked about incentives, would it be for hiring managers, IP hiring managers to go through that exercise and not expect the same result? Thank you.
Thank you. Those are excellent questions about the future of the professions, and the answers are that the regulator itself isn't the only group that can solve those. Those are questions about that go to, in part, who's able to provide training, which firms are operating in both English and French. If they're not operating in both English and French, can you still recruit somebody who is bilingual, who might be working primarily or exclusively during training in English or in French, but who would be able to migrate their skills across should they find a new opportunity post-call in a bilingual environment? That is a tough area for Canada. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I've spoken with firms that operate in business in French and those in English, and it's not that we're in the two solitudes, so to speak, but it certainly, there are different client bases at times, which makes it a little more challenging to have work experiences where people are going to be exposed to the technical work in both English and French. So all I would say is that it's partly a market issue and availability of placements provided by governments, firms, agencies, and other employers. In terms of the question of the apprenticeship, I think Jen provided those examples, and there are suggestions of various incentives that would be mostly for those who are supervisors as opposed to firms necessarily. And I don't think any of the recommendations would solve the question of brain drain. Just like other regulated professions with an apprenticeship, there's a bargain for training, after which once somebody is in the profession, they have the ability to move. And that is always a challenge, be it a physician in a healthcare setting, in a hospital environment, taking a spot competitive to get into, and they're nurtured by the best, and then they move to a different province, or worse, a different country. We see this across the board. I think that what employers can do as best as possible is make it an awesome place to work, right? And try to recruit the best and brightest, create a workplace culture that fosters inclusion and people wanting to be there. It's hard, but it's going to be hard regardless of whether an apprenticeship is 2 years or 1 year or 6 months. Recruitment and retention is going to be a challenge, and the lateral movement opportunities tend to be in the earlier years of one's professional career. So these are challenges, and we've heard about them, and we understand why for some that becomes barriers. And we're just going to have to see whether the profession accepts that these are some of the costs of being part of a profession, and that they will continue to offer placements for those who have an interest in being in the profession. But what happens after somebody has passed through their tutelage depends on a variety of factors.
Good afternoon, Kevin Tour. I'm with Communitech. I'm an innovation hub located in Waterloo region. I'm a little bit of a fish out of water in this group, so please bear with me a little bit. Thank you. This is probably the first meeting I've been in all week. I've been in Ottawa all week talking with a variety of individuals that the notion of AI has not come up, so I'm going to bring it up.
I talked about it.
Did you?
Yeah, don't worry. Go ahead.
Okay, let's talk about it again.
Please.
Where do you what is the role of CPATA in terms of because obviously it's gonna have an effect on patent trademark. It's gonna have an effect on everybody as we go forward. What do you see the role in CPATA in dealing with that and helping to deal with patent trademark agents deal with that going forward and dealing with every element of sort of the I guess the landscape going forward, and where do you see your role and how are we going to deal with it, and how do we make sure that I guess your profession is developing the best product and delivering the best product to those that rely on it, and then again, just if you could speak to that a little bit.
Sure. So Gen AI, of course, has been highly disruptive for everyone and everything. And in the professions in particular, it's raised everything from the ostrich factor of this won't change anything to the sky is falling and we're all doomed and robots will take our jobs. The truth will likely lie somewhere in the middle. And of course, what's happening today is not a predictor given the exponential changes of where AI may take us 5-10 years from now. And so where we're at right now is at an educational mode. We've seen issues already in professional regulation around the application of Gen AI. Unfortunately, we had hallucinated cases cited by some of our licensees recently. And, these were honest mistakes. And so we used those as teachable moments. And we released a Gen AI guide that talks about the ethics and practical applications of Gen AI. So what we're doing is first introducing the concept of Gen AI for those who may have missed the last year or so, but also to discuss what are some of the practical ways that people are embracing Gen AI in practices right now. So there's quite a range, not just on drafting, but just in managing firms, in managing agencies, in managing day-to-day. And the lines are blurring. So understanding whether you think you're using AI or not, you probably are. So we're doing that sort of education first. Then we talk about what are some of the use cases in practice and what are some of the risks that need to be considered without necessarily saying thou shalt, because like other areas of technology, different licensees will have different playbooks and different approaches. And so we're educating about some of the best practices and about some of the risk areas that as a regulator we're seeing around, for example, giving up your independent skill and judgment and letting the computer take the wheel. We're not the only profession where this has happened. There are cases out of Ontario, out of across Canada, the States, Israel, elsewhere, of FACTA lawyers that have misused AI. And so we're trying to get ahead of those concerns. There's a separate question, which is about the standards that will apply for being able to patent a technology or being able to patent something when AI was used in its development or AI was used in the development of trademarks. Those are more about policies being set by patent and trademark offices or by the boards that decide these matters. And so we're also encouraging the professions to stay current. We're also developing ongoing practice management resources, and we're trying to sensitize across different audiences. So on Gen AI, I spoke to 600 people at the Law Society of Ontario in January. We're speaking at IPIC's webinar on this in June. We'll be speaking with other regulators to learn how other regulators are also dealing with this later this year. And we're fielding questions from licensees as they come in.
We don't have any more questions online. It's 3:27. So if there are last questions, please come up to the mic or type them online.
No takers. Okay. Well, we've pretty much reached our formal endpoint. So what's nice about this is for those who are online, we can give you 2.5 minutes back in your day. And for everyone else who's here, thank you. And we encourage you to stick around. We have some light refreshments and get to know your IP neighbor. And we welcome the opportunity to just enjoy each other's company now. So thank you so much for all of you for attending. And if you have other questions that come up after, feel free to reach out, please, and we'll get back in touch with you. Thanks again.